This is Robert Skead, and I am so excited to be with you today on National Good News Day, because don't we all love good news? And I've got some good news for you today, and that is that you and I live in the greatest country in the world, where when you and I work hard to pursue our dreams, anything can happen. With a lot of hard work, and when we pray for God's blessings, we can achieve anything we put our hearts and minds to. When we get the help of other people too, to join us in our pursuit of our goals and our dreams, amazing things can happen. So I'm excited about good news and about Good News Day. So here we are. We're going to talk today about one of my favorite subjects, the American Revolutionary War. And as a patriot myself, this is one of my favorite topics. I have a relative who fought in the American Revolution. Actually, I have a few. I have a descendant who was actually on the Mayflower. So my love affair for our country goes all the way back to the Mayflower, to the American Revolution, to today. And as a patriot, I love to write about the American Revolution and talk to kids and adults about it too. And I'm the author of Patriots, Redcoats, and Spies. And I'm the author of Submarines, Secrets, and a Daring Rescue. And you may have noticed my hat, and since I don't think this hat is going to be coming back into fashion anytime soon, I think I'm going to discard the hat, and we'll get rid of that. But it's always fun for me to wear my American Revolution colonial hat. So let's talk a little bit about our nation's history and the American Revolution. Real quick, Patriots, Redcoats, and Spies is the story of two teenage boys. Their names are John and Ambrose Clark, and they're on a secret mission. They discover that their father is a spy for the Culper Spy Ring after he gets shot by two British Redcoats. And their father has a secret message to get to General Washington. And after he's shot, he only has two hopes of getting that message to the general, and that's his two teenage boys. So they set off on a mission on the shores of Fairfield, Connecticut, where they get this letter from their dad to get to General Washington. They've got no resources, no money, no horses, no nothing. And all they know is that General Washington is somewhere in the New Jersey area, and they've got to get that secret message to him. That's about all the things that go wrong, right? From point A to point B. And what they don't know is that the two Redcoats that shot their dad are hot on their trail. So that's a little bit about Patriots, Redcoats, and Spies. But I love writing about our nation's history, because in our nation's history, we can see the hand of God, which actually General George Washington referred to as the hand of providence. We could see the hand of God involved in the birth of our nation during the American Revolution and the lives of the patriots who fought for our liberties and our freedoms. And writing my stories, I had to do a lot of research. And in my research, I found out some really cool things about our history during the American Revolution that maybe you didn't learn in your classroom. I know I didn't. And the first thing I want to share with you today about is what I mentioned about in Patriots, Redcoats, and Spies, and that's what I refer to as the Culper Spy Ring. So did you know that there were spies during the American Revolution, and that these spies were actually, the spy ring was actually created by General George Washington and another man named Benjamin Talmadge? So it's true. So what happened was the British troops were in New York City, and General Washington needed to know what the troops were doing so then he can make wise decisions about what to do with his own troops, where to move them, and if the British troops were going this way, he needed to know. If they're going that way, he needed to know how many troops were there and what they were doing. So General Washington, with the help of this Major Benjamin Talmadge, created a spy ring, a group of secret spies in New York City and in Long Island, New York, and they would report back to General using spy letters and invisible ink and cipher codes, really cool stuff. And they would get these messages through secret couriers back to General Washington so that he could make decisions. So that was one of the fun things that I found out in my history of writing Patriots, Redcoats, and Spies. The other thing that I found out was that the very first submarine invented for warfare actually happened during the American Revolution as well. So can you imagine there was a submarine during colonial times, and it actually worked. It was called the American Turtle Submarine. It was invented by a guy named David Bushnell in Connecticut. And you can see it's featured here in my book, Submarine Secrets and a Daring Rescue, which is the continuing adventures of John Ambrose Clark, the teenage boys. And in this mission, or in this story, they have the mission of operating the American Turtle Submarine to try to blow up a British frigate. But what happened was, there was this guy, David Bushnell. He was a Yale graduate, and he invented waterproof gunpowder, but he needed a way to deliver it to blow up a British ship. And so he created a submarine to do that. And they called it the Turtle because it looked like a turtle as it sat in the water, but it actually looked like a giant acorn shell. And it was pitched tight with tar to keep it watertight. It had ballast, it had mechanisms. And the idea was to get this submarine under a British ship. It had what was called an auger, and they screwed a bomb into the hull of the ship, and then it would have a detonating device, and then the bomb would be attached to the ship, and then the submarine would float away, and then the bomb would go off and the ship would blow up. So it did have one mission. It was unsuccessful because what they didn't count on was that the British ships had a metal plate underneath the wooden hull, so they couldn't attach the bomb successfully. But who knew that there was a submarine that was invented during the American Revolution in colonial times, and that it actually worked? There's so much more I could tell you about it. I don't have a lot of time, but you can read more about it in Submarine Secrets and a Daring Rescue, or you can Google the American Turtle Submarine and read more about it too. Another great thing that I learned about in my research was about the character and faith of General George Washington. And some historians will say that General Washington wasn't a Christian or didn't have a strong faith. But if you read the writings of General Washington and his numerous letters, he referred to himself as a Christian. In his journal entries, he talked about visiting churches and going to worship on a Sunday morning. And he also encouraged the troops to also behave in a Christ-like manner. So let me read you some quotes from General Washington. This one is from one of his general orders in 1776. And he says, "The general hopes and trusts that every officer and man will endeavor to live and act as becomes a Christian soldier, defending the dearest rights and liberties of his country." Another writing of General Washington, this was from his general orders in May of 1778, and he says, "While we are zealously performing the duties of good citizens and soldiers, we certainly ought not to be inattentive to the higher duties of religion. To the distinguished character of patriot, it should be our highest glory to add the more distinguished character of Christian." Great quote that reflects the faith of General Washington. George Washington also said, "It is impossible to rightly govern the world without God and the Bible." So they're just three great quotes and examples from George Washington about his faith. And that faith that he had gave him that great character that when he faced tough times and obstacles as general of the Continental Army during the American Revolution, it prompted him to not give up. It prompted him to have a faith in God and a faith in providence, as he would say too, that would then guide his decisions and guide the outcome of the American Revolution in the favor of the Continental Army and of the colonial patriots. And that's exactly what happened. God was involved in the events of mankind. He is today, and he was then as well. So it's important that we know our history, because when people tell us lies or falsities about things from our history, we need to know what the history is so we can combat those lies. So I want to encourage you guys to study your history so that you can know the truth. One of the things patriots back in the American Revolution, and even today, are known for is the American spirit. Now, for me, the American spirit is defined by someone who doesn't sit down in the face of an obstacle, someone who's an overcomer, someone who believes in fighting for justice and truth, someone who, when they see that there's something wrong going on, they'll stand up and fight against it for good. And trust God at the same time, that because they know they're doing the right thing, they know they're doing the godly thing. So to me, that's kind of reflective of the American spirit. Someone who's willing to fight and stand up to injustice and believe in truth and know that God is going to ultimately bless their efforts and be an overcomer. So that's the American spirit to me. And I know in your life, like none of our lives are perfect, right? So in my life, I have painful things that happen. I'm sure there's painful things that happen in your life as well. Our families sometimes get divorced. People get sick. People lose jobs. So maybe in your family, there's some hard times going on. And I want to encourage you to have that American spirit that never gives up, that spirit that says, yeah, I'm going to fight. I'm going to push through, and trusting God that he is with you, right? He promises, the Lord promises that he was always with us. He'll never forsake us. That is so true. And sometimes we can't get around something. We can't get under it or over it. You know, we have to persevere and be resilient and go through it. And when we do that, God promises to be with us, and he promises to bless us too. And that gives us a spirit of perseverance, right? Our character is developed. We get to be someone who perseveres through hard times. And at the end, you know, we'll see that there's a blessing involved. So I want to encourage you as well to have that American spirit that our patriots had. You know, George Washington had that spirit as well. There are many times when George Washington had to retreat with the Continental Army. There were times when people didn't actually think he was the right leader at the right time. But General Washington, I want to say, believed in the power of positive thinking, and he believed in trusting in God. And here's a quote that General Washington gave. And he said, "We should never despair. Our position has before been unpromising and has changed for the better. So I trust it will again." Let me read that to you one more time. General Washington says, "We should never despair. Our position has before been unpromising and has changed for the better. So I trust it will again." And to me, that is so encouraging, because I know in my life and in your life, when things aren't looking the way we want them to look, when we're not experiencing the things we want to experience, when hard times come, when our positions are unpromising, but we can trust that it is going to change. It's going to be good again. God promises that all things work for good for those who love him and are called according to his purposes, right? That's from Romans. George Washington knew that, and he knew that when things were bad, they would change and get better again. And that holds true for you and I today too. So I want to encourage you with those words as well. Be like General Washington and be a perseverant patriot. Be somebody who has resilience that reflects that American spirit. So keep fighting and never give up, and keep trusting in God. So, you know, as we close, I just want to share with you my love for American history happened back in 1976 during our country's bicentennial. And my dad bought me books on the American Revolution. He took me to Washington, D.C. and to Mount Vernon. He took me to places in New England and here in New Jersey where a lot of the American Revolution was fought as well. And I got to learn about history that way. And I want to encourage you to do the same. There are so many great books beyond mine that are historical fiction that can help teach you about the American Revolution and what people like you and me went through to fight for liberties for us all, right? People gave the ultimate sacrifice of their lives so that others could experience liberties and freedom. And that's, you know, no small cost. So I'd encourage you to, you know, read for fun, read historical fiction books, to visit landmarks like in Washington, D.C. and the New England area. Go to museums like the American Revolution Museum in Philadelphia. You can look at their websites as well and learn a lot there. And talk to people in the military who kind of know what it's like to make that ultimate sacrifice as far as giving of their service. And, you know, certainly people in maybe your family and people that you know as family have lost loved ones who fought for our freedoms. So I want to encourage you as well to learn about history that way by talking to people and visiting places and reading about it as well. So my name is Robert Skead. I want to thank you today for joining me on this National Good News Day. The good news is that each and every one of you is blessed with a God-given talent. And I want to challenge you to find out what that talent is and then devote yourselves to developing that talent. And I promise you, you will have more joy in your life when you're using your God-given talent. It won't matter if you're rich or famous, but you will have more joy by using your talent in life than any amount of money or fame could ever bring. So that's my challenge to you. And my good news to you is you have a talent, go find it, develop it, use it to God's glory, and you will have a joyful and fulfilled and abundant life. So this is Robert Skead with some good news. Happy National Good News Day, and God bless.